go to the Vanderbilt game they played.
Oh, yeah.
I was playing phone tag.
I'm turn this on. I got the paper copy.
To be approved, some engineering contract. And the general
Hey, Holmes.
Don't have any news, do you?
so we're playing his name is Dan.
Appreciate all your work.
Come across.
How are you, sir? Eddie? Eddie, son. That was more than Eddie. I gave you more than He didn't like Tyler getting to go first every time.
Wow.
And
A little too much.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, but still, it's still been cool. Yeah, oh, yeah.
And then I was like, well, and we got lucky because my son-in-law coaches for us.
Oh, so you could have probably done something here.
I've been emailing back and forth with Vanderbilt staff trying to get a tour of the
Facility.
but they won't let you tour because of all the.
You can tell by looking at his face, he thinks it's in his bag.
Oh, wow. Say, I'm gonna look you up next time if I'm going back.
I told him that we go somewhere different every year. I may go back to Nashville now right now.
It's fun. It is a fun. Have y'all been down to Houston at all?
No, I mean I've been
Yeah. Y'all need to go sometime. Take the boys to an Astros game or even Houston Rockets.
They were talking about if we time it right because when I pick up it's still baseball, it's football
Right.
starting up, and so I was talking about Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
The Chiefs and the Bulls are right there together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've been there and I've been to hotels before. So anyway,
It's a couple games there.
Wasn't good weather outside of that.
I still don't.
No, not that I know of
News you for
anything
yourself,
here
take
at all, but
You ought to be in
maybe,
for both, so
I don't know, maybe here for the
Yeah,
South
thank
Texas.
you.
Probably
I hope we are.
They're just going to splash this up on.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
sometimes.
Who knows?
Hey, we're in the middle of sales tax election.
They think we're doing something
look smart.
underhanded.
You can look smart.
Well, the
No.
Larsons.
Can't do that. What time
Just
is it?
keeping, hey, I'm just keeping my finger crossed.
Won it.
I can't tell you.
Going
719.
I say it.
What do you want?
It all depends on the audit.
No, what do you want?
Pretty good on it winning.
Oh, Shakespeare Theater.
What's the first thing on the deal?
Who's giving out?
Presentation.
No, I don't have it. A whole bunch more.
Not on mine.
It's not on mine, dude.
What have you got?
Yeah, it's on there.
Well, I made, is there paper copies
You're
back
right.
there?
There he is.
Where's it at?
Up top, right
Like,
Oh, okay.
mine is not
Right here.
turning on.
Oh, man. I didn't cipher that in.
Well, thanks a lot.
I don't see.
You got to redo, man. Doesn't count.
I don't see the presenter. No, I stick with what I go.
It would be Tyler.
Yeah, if it's Tyler.
It's like plot.
Yeah.
Y'all look at
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure y'all have looked at it.
Hey, what do you think?
How you doing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna, there's one big reason it's gonna stop. It's just all the gloat. It'll be never ending.
I hope Hopper shows up. I got to get on him. I called in to. I ripped out everything in my flower beds this weekend, and I put it in piles. And I called them, and I found out when they came by, and they said, "Well, they don't run on Mondays, but they'll come by Tuesday." Well, it's like they hand pick stuff out of there to take.
You can't throw dirt and stuff in our landfill.
It's
Let
barely
me
any.
log in.
Sir,
It's like a little bit.
sir, you can't
Hose it off or something.
Sir, you can't throw. Oh, yeah, here comes our audit.
I talked to Zane and he told me he's in a Christmas Carol. Is it Christmas Carol?
Miracle on 30th.
Miracle on 30th. Yeah, I told him I'm gonna try to come. I think I'm gonna bring my granddaughters and take them to come see it.
Yeah. Well, he's got a little part of the series.
Yeah, he said he was.
Yeah. I've had to listen to that soundtrack.
Serves you right. Hey, hey.
I'm sure.
I'm trying to be good about it.
I know. I know.
Well, I guess
Each
Mark
their
is
own, you
still
know.
in the
Hey.
woods. Should I vote? Text him?
Mark.
Oh, he's here.
I know his
I didn't
wife
know he
said
was
he
in
was
the
going to the deer woods. You know, when we were at Hideaway.
Bless you.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna.
Hey, who's that? It wasn't Finley,
Yeah,
was
that's like a 9.
I guess to take
Hey,
her
dude.
to the bathroom and we
Well,
were
you
leaving
yeah.
and she's so cute.
She is a
My
riot.
granddaughter's curious what was going on that side too. I saw that car to pop her head over. I was like,
Oh, yeah. She's not shy at all and loves to have conversation.
Where, what location? On
wanted all the
Clifton?
rest and all this time.
Okay.
My
All right,
granddaughter.
good deal. Hey, Wes, I just now got your
One of them
text,
never
but
was stranger and the other
I
one,
feel good.
you know, the
Okay.
older one wanted to go buy tile all the time. Leave him alone.
I have no idea.
Good evening, everyone. We proceed each council meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer, or prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like, please feel free to join us.
Oh, sure. You'll bow with me. Our gracious Father, we want to thank you for the abundant blessings that you've given us. We just thank you, Lord, for this community that you've graciously blessed us to be stewards of. And we just ask, Lord, that you continue to give us your wisdom and guidance as we make decisions on this city that you have put us over. Bless everyone that's here, and we give honor and praise to you for your graciousness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, please call the roll, sir.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt? Here. Miss Mel?
Here.
Miss Smith?
Here.
And Miss Isby?
Here.
Mr. Jones is having to work late, and Mr. Ledbetter is in a tree stand somewhere in South Arkansas. That's what he texted me about just a little bit ago.
Is it deer season or something?
It's Arkansas.
Resist. I
Yeah.
couldn't resist.
You should have received the copies of the October 24th, 2017 council minutes.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Next up, we have our finance report. Let's see, I'm sorry, from BKD. We're going to do the audit tonight, Mr. Winningham, 2016? Okay.
There we go. Mr. Andy Richards is here with BKD, the firm that conducts our annual audit, and I'll turn it over to him to give a presentation.
I printed mine off.
Good evening. Appreciate you letting me come and present to you the 2016 annual audit for the city. We've got some good results to share with you. Before I get into too much of it, I just want to kind of highlight or outline what all the responsibilities that we had under the audit. Of course, we're responsible for auditing the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles using generally accepted auditing standards. But we're also tasked with auditing the federal grants that the city spends during the year, and also following the governmental auditing standards, which also requires to issue a report on the internal controls over financial reporting. The final task for the audit process is also to issue an examination report over the city's compliance with certain state laws, particularly the municipal accounting law and a few laws that apply to the police department and the district court. So all of that is actually covered under the financial statement packet that I believe that you all have received, and so I want to go over that. The first thing I'll cover is just to kind of tell you about our independent auditor's report. It's at the front of the bound report. So that report covers our opinion over the financial statements for the city. Our opinion is what we consider to be unmodified, which is basically a clean opinion, meaning that we believe that the financial statements are being reported and they're materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So, so that's a clean opinion there, and it also covers some of the supplementary information under the report, which would be like your schedule of federal expenditures that's in the back, and we'll cover that a little bit. Want to kind of point you to page 7 in the report, if you've got that in front of you. That's kind of I use this page, this is part of the management discussion analysis that management puts as part of the report. It's required to supplement the financial statements. So I'm pointing this out to you because this is kind of a condensed version of all the financial numbers for the city, and there's some comparison there. You can see there's columns for 2016 to 2015, so that kind of gives you some historical perspective of how 2016 went. The two sections there, the governmental activities and business type activities, refers to the different types of activities that the city engages in. The government's going to be more along the lines that includes your general funds, grant, things that are typically spent with sales tax and taxes and other grant revenues type like that. The business type activities are going to cover the services that you provide that you charge a fee for. That's going to include the airport and sanitation and those things. So it's kind of broken up that way. If you kind of look at the bottom, the total net position, I kind of start at the bottom of this first schedule of net position. And that gives you kind of an overall picture of the net financial condition for the city. So in total in 16, it was measured at $127.8 million. At 2016, total net position was measured at $132.8. So there is a small decline from 2015 to 16, but a relatively stable. We further break down net position, and net position is generally, in this governmental reporting model, is generally the difference between assets and your liabilities. We've got some other items in there that refer to some deferred recognition items, but the bulk of the financial statement amounts pertain to your assets and liabilities. So break it down into different categories: net investment and capital assets. So that's going to be what the city's got invested in capital assets. You've got $150 million in 2016 compared to $154.7 million in 2015. So there's where your small decline from 15 to 16 occurs, and so I would probably attribute most of that just to the overall depreciation that gets recorded in the financial statements of the capital assets. So it's kind of a non-cash figure there that's causing that decline. Restricted net position refers to funds that you have on hand at the end of the year that's restricted mainly for bond payments and bond reserves. So it's fairly consistent there, $15.3 million in 15 compared to $15 million in 16. And then the last category, unrestricted net position, would be whatever is left over that you may be able to utilize for whatever purposes that you need. You've got a deficit position there, a negative position that is relatively consistent from year to year, $37.2 million in 15 compared to $37.3 million in 16. And so the city used to not have that negative net position, but if you remember a couple years ago, we adopted the pension accounting standards and booked some large long-term liabilities. It was kind of a bitter pill that all the state and local governments were having to swallow. So there's a lot of local governments that their net asset, their net position is kind of looking like this based upon those net pension liabilities. It doesn't mean that you're insolvent or anything like that at all, but it means that you've got some long-term expenditures that eventually you'll have to raise revenues for. I mean, overall, you've got total assets of $252 million, which is slightly ahead of 15, and total liabilities, 136 million compared to 127 million in the prior year. So things, if you look from, how things change from year to year, relatively stable year there. So real quickly, just turn to page 8. And it gives you a summary, condensed summary of your total revenues for the city, expenses that make up that total change in net position. So you can see total revenues for the city, $58.5 million in 16 versus $59.8 million in 15 there. So just a small decline in revenues. You actually had an increase in sales taxes during the year. So I think, for the most part, probably a decline in some of the capital grants and contributions that you recorded during the year. And that's probably going to mostly pertain to the fact that the airport project was winding down. So it's kind of some non-recurring projects that you had, more revenues in 15 versus 16. If you look at total expenses from year to year, the total expenses increased from 63.5 million in 16 up to 55, or down up from 55.6 million in 15. So you've got about a $7 or $8 million increase in those expenses from year to year. So overall, your change in net position for 16 was a decline of $5 million, and so that's kind of gives you that picture and how we get from the year-to-year change on the prior page as far as your assets and liabilities. So that's kind of the highlight of the overall, financial picture. I want to continue on and talk about the federal grant portion of the audit. You had basically about $900,000 in federal grant expenditures, and about $600,000 of that pertained to the community development block grant that you administer every year. And so we consider that to be the major federal program. So we're required to audit that particular program. We issued opinion on that, which is included in the back of this report. It's an unmodified or a clean opinion on your compliance with those federal rules. So that basically means that you've complied with all the federal rules and regulations under that grant for 2016. The other piece of these reports that are in the back pertain to your internal controls. So as part of the audit process under government auditing standards, we're required to part of our audit work, we do kind of a risk-based audit approach, and so we do an assessment of internal controls for that purposes, both on your policies and procedures around the financial reporting side, as well as maintaining compliance with these federal regulations for these grants. And so we don't necessarily issue an opinion per se on those, but we're required to identify any potential material weaknesses and significant deficiencies if we've come across that in your policies and procedures. And so for 16, we had no findings related to that. And so, we think overall the city's policies and practices, their internal control system is functioning at a high level. And I know during the course of the audit, we noticed, your staff does a good job, and particularly helping us, through the process of the audit. Probably the last piece that I'll summarize, and then I'll shut up for questions, is the state compliance piece of this audit. We do issue an opinion on our examination. We examine the management's assertion that they've complied with all the particular laws that are spelled out in the report. So we've issued an unmodified opinion there, or a clean opinion. And so overall, really good results for the city for 2016. You're maintaining compliance with federal rules, state laws, and maintaining good financial practices for the city. So I think management overall is doing a good job. All right, I'll entertain any questions that anybody has. It's kind of a short and sweet of a long report, but
Been here 2 weeks ago.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. There's no
All right.
action required on this. It was just a presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have a report of our standing committees, starting with Community Development. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item is a resolution setting a public hearing to abandon the entirety of the north-south alley in Block 6 of the Burns addition. And we have a resolution to be read for this. It's Resolution R-1757. This sets the 28th day of November as the date for the public hearing.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this public hearing, set the date. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 6-0.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Second item, Mr. Mayor, is along the same lines, and it is a resolution setting a public hearing to abandon the entirety of the north-south alley in Block 8 of the Burns subdivision, and we have a resolution to read for this. It's Resolution R-1758.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this, to set the public hearing for the next council meeting on November 28th. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Third item, Mr. Mayor, I was notified that this has been paid in full by Missy Schrag, so we will move on to what's listed as item A4, and that is going to be a resolution requesting the Faulkner County Tax Collector place a certified lien against property as a result of incurred expenses by the City of Conway. This is at 255 Garland Street. Is there an owner or representative of an owner from 255 Garland Street in Conway with us tonight? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone, so we have a resolution to be read for this, and this is Resolution R-1758, or 59, I'm sorry.
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution to place a lien on property at 255 Garland Street. Any further discussion?
This is a sizable amount of money,
Yes, it was a.
over $5,000 demolition.
Yeah, they had a structure fire there, and it sat for quite some time, and they decided it was time to bring it on down.
Felicia had sent us some pictures of it earlier. Felicia had sent us some pictures.
That passes 6-0. No, I'm sorry. Mr. Yeah,
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
it's now 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds for the Spencer Street Brownfield Cleanup Project administered by the Planning and Development Department. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's Ordinance 017.
123.
1, 2, 3.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
I make a motion for adoption.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
This appears to be accounting.
Pardon me?
This appears to be an accounting
Yes, sir.
for the most part.
Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Miss Isby?
Yes.
Miss Mel?
Aye.
Miss Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 6-0.
Next item is an ordinance renaming a portion of South Amity Road to Crane Drive. We have an ordinance to be read for this. It's Ordinance 017-124.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. This is that portion of street. It's just, I think it only runs right there in front of Crane. It's a new street. So we're not talking about having an impact on other businesses or residences or anything like that.
Did we get any other input on that? I know we tabled it last time.
And I guess while Brian's coming up, how soon the rest of Amity is going to be built?
I'm not sure on that, but Finley's not here. Finley, you back there?
Finley, what's our date? What's our date on the new Amity? Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if you had heard anything.
I'm not going to try to guess on what other contractors.
Well, come on. Anyway.
I'll hold his feet to
Well,
the
the
fire.
ordinance is scheduled to take effect January 1, so I'm hoping maybe by January 1, they're moving along with it, but, so if you look at the bottom of the ordinance, it does say taking effect January 1. So that was the second question. What was the first question?
Input. Entertain any other names.
Names.
That's the one that just came to mind, and they're the folks that pioneered the street, I guess you could say, out there in a way, so, I mean, it's not a reward to them or anything, it just seemed to make sense that Crane dealerships were there. It's a open name, so. Basically just kind of came into being. I'm not sure where the name itself came from.
But there have been no other suggestions or anything submitted
No,
since?
nobody,
Okay.
it's been submitted to our office or anything.
Okay.
No.
Sounds as good as any to me.
Yes.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Here.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Reluctantly.
Passed 6-0.
Reluctant, yeah.
Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to dispose assets from inventory for the street and engineering department, and we have a kind of a lengthy list. It's about a page and a half of things that we need to get rid of. Jamie, do we need to know anything other than we just need to get rid of them? No?
No, and you'll see on that, I'm sorry. As you'll see, the book value on most of that equipment is zero. It has reached its useful life, and we just need to write it off the books or sell it. We're gonna try to sell it if we can.
Sounds like me. I've reached the end of my useful life. Useful life.
So we'll try to sell the sweeper if we can. The sweeper on here.
Yes, anything that has any value whatsoever, we will try to sell.
Okay.
And I would note for the record, in looking at this list on the purchase dates, I see lots of these back to the 1990s.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd say we get our money's worth out of the stuff we buy.
I see in 1980, 85 and 86.
I make a motion, we approve this disposal.
Second.
We have a motion.
Oh, where?
A second to
Oh,
approve this
72.
disposal. Any further discussion?
Older than you.
Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to grant a permanent access, utility, and sidewalk easement to be constructed to allow access to and from the adjacent 6th Street for the Street and Engineering Department. And Finley, is this you?
I suppose so.
Come on.
I want to come up tonight.
Have a map, I think you've got a map. Yeah, there it is. So the property on the north side of 6th Street, when 6th Street was rebuilt, it was realigned to get over the overpass in the best place, and get over the I-40 in the best place, and created this remnant right here. That's where, because 6th Street used to come up there and come down around the runway. So when it was brought south, it created that remnant, and so now the Bill Tyler property doesn't have as much frontage on 6th Street. When we built 6th Street, we added a left turn in. It's kind of hard to see because there's a lot of line work on here, but that hatched area is the area that we're proposing for the easement. And immediately south of that, there's a left turn in, a median break on 6th Street. And we put that median break there and a driveway there, essentially to serve both pieces of property, both the remnant and Mr. Tyler's property. We kind of tried to put that, we didn't know exactly where that property line was actually at the time. We tried to put it in a place where we thought it could serve multiple purposes. And it ended up being a little bit further west than it needed to be, because our remnant's kind of cutting him off. So that's the purpose of this easement, just to grant access through that median break back to Mr. Tyler's property.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second to grant the access, utility, and sidewalk easement. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, next up, we have an ordinance appropriating funds for the Bean Street improvements for Parks and Recreation. Mr. Ibbotson.
Back a few months ago, we discussed Phase 2 of Conway Station Park. And in that Phase 2 was a parking lot on the south side of the facility. And with the work projected to be done on Bean Street, we thought it was wise just to wait. And the street department's begun that work and has started building the parking lot for us, saving us a lot of money. So we kind of waited until we got a little bit further along in those projects so we could have a better idea on the exact cost. And the $75,000 is what they project to finish out that parking lot.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The ordinance 017-125, Ms. Mel,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt.
Aye.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
Thank you.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Ibbotson. Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating funds received from Walmart for the Conway Fire Department. Chief Winter will not be here tonight. This is Chief Carden's first night. So if you got some really hard questions, ask him.
Be gentle.
Don't cut him any slack.
Be gentle.
It's a test.
Yes, the fire department received a check for $1,000 from the local Sam's. Scott Irwin is the manager there, and I wrote the grant for them, and they were gracious enough to give us $1,000. We want to accept this and spend, buy some chains for our chainsaws and some, it says liquid smoke. No, we're not cooking or smoking, but it's for our smoke machines for training purposes. So.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as 126.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
Hang on one second. We'll need his 6th vote.
Oh, okay.
He said a quick call.
All right, hang on a second. I'd like to point out we have a representative of the Boy Scouts of America here tonight. Thank you for being here.
Haven't you?
UCA journalism. Thank you for being here.
Interested citizens.
Ma'am, I'm sorry?
Interested citizens.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good.
He's icing me, isn't he?
And I don't know what we're gonna do without Joe Rowe here. I mean, you're doing a great job, but I'm used to seeing Joe sitting over there.
That's exactly where he sits. Close to the exit.
I was kind of hoping y'all wouldn't notice it wasn't him.
Actually, we can't waive it with 5. We can pass it with 5, can't we? You've already waived it? So we
been
can vote. We
waived.
just have to wait to waive the next one,
Here
though,
it
so we can
comes.
vote.
No, we don't. Look here.
Perfect.
Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Pruitt. Aye. Ms. Mel.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Isby.
Yes.
This is 6-0. Next up, we have an ordinance to accept grants received from the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management for the Conway Fire Department. Chief Carden.
This is a grant from, like you said, the Department of Emergency Management. We get this almost every year. I've written this since '04, and to my knowledge, I think '07 we didn't receive this money. This year it's for $337,500 to purchase a robot. It's going to actually replace our robot that was purchased in '03. The $327,500 of that is for the robot. The $10,000 is for travel expenses. We're sending 2 techs to FBI bomb school in Huntsville, Alabama this year. That will pay for them. It was just some money that we kind of threw in there on the side.
Did you have 2 techs retire this year?
We actually had 3, Chief. Yes, sir. Chief Winter stepped down, and then Short, and then McIntyre.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
017-127. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we have consideration to approve the disposal of assets from inventory for the Animal Welfare Unit. Chief Spradlin.
Good evening. Yeah, we're asking to dispose of an animal transport box. We think this is from the 90s. I think we've gotten our use out of it, and it's no longer fits any of the trucks that we have, so we want to take that off the inventory.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove assets from inventory for the Animal Welfare Unit. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. Next up, consideration to approve disposal of assets from inventory for the Conway Fire Department. I'm sorry, Police Department.
Please.
I wrote that in
Get in the
there.
habit of saying that, don't you?
I was using a red pen. That's my fault.
Yeah.
Chief Spradlin.
This, doing some house cleaning. This is all e-waste type stuff. Everything's obsolete, broken, has no value, so we're asking to remove that from our inventory also.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove assets from inventory for the Conway Police Department. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Next is an ordinance appropriating funds from various entities for the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
It's a general accounting ordinance you guys have seen plenty of times. I have nothing to add. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The 017-128. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Next, we have an ordinance appropriating grant funds for the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
This is the 2016 JAG grant that we split with the Sheriff's Office 50/50, and we're asking to receive the funds of $23,237.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
Motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Make a
Aye.
motion for adoption.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
we gotta waive the, sorry.
Any opposed? All right. Hang on, Ms. Mel.
Now I'll make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The 017-129. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. And finally, Chief Spradlin, an ordinance appropriating funds at the Conway Police Department for Operations Shop Secure, which is a very successful program from your department.
Yeah, believe it or not, Christmas is upon us again. We are asking for $50,000 in overtime funds. As you know, is to pay for police officers to be in our shopping areas, starting on Black Friday all the way through Christmas Eve. Been doing this for several years, and it's been a big hit. We'd like to continue that.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
Is that enough, Chief?
We're going to test the limits this year. Now that Lewis Crossing has opened fully, we may cross it a little bit, but
That's why I asked the question.
we have enough in our department overtime to cover that, we believe.
Okay.
So we've been doing it, like I said, we've been doing it for several years, so we already have that schedule of when we appropriate those officers, and we have a general hourly pay rate for that, and if we go over, it won't be by much.
We'd like to make sure that people feel safe.
Exactly.
And if we need to talk about some additional funds, I would be all in favor of doing that if we need to.
We received comments, positive comments,
Yes.
folks like seeing you out there.
Yes.
And just to add to that, like we said last year, it's not a patrol car. This is foot patrol. They're in the stores, they're on the sidewalk, so
Right.
Good.
interacting with the public.
Mr. Garrett.
The 017-130. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Chief, before you leave right quick, I'm sorry, could you give us a brief update on our bicycle police program? Is that started?
Yeah, the crime suppression unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have added a lieutenant and 4 officers to what we call our crime suppression unit, and we started that about 2 months ago. They've been on our bicycle trails, bike path. that has been relatively unpatrolled since that path keeps getting larger and larger. We've got a lot of positive feedback. They've been, it's a dual role. Not only are they out on the bike paths but in the neighborhoods, but when it starts to get dark, they're hitting our hot spots. You know, if we're having a car break in somewhere or burglaries, then we focus them to that area, and that's their job. They don't have to answer calls for service necessarily. So, but the bike program is, we're just now getting that started and getting them upfitted with everything. So it's been going very well.
Great, thank you.
Good. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the ordinance adopting procurement card policy and procedures handbook for the city of Conway. Ms. Jamie Bryce.
You should have a copy of the policies and procedures for the procurement cards. We'd like to get this set so we can hand out the cards either in the next week or two. Basically, this outlines the cardholder responsibilities and procedures that they need to take with the cards.
Got plenty of checks and balances in here to make sure everything goes right?
I've had a team that has helped me a lot review these to hopefully make sure that we included everything that needs to be included. It's just like any other policy and procedure. We will update it as needed.
You're comfortable with it then on the front end?
I am, yes, sir.
Thank you.
And our city attorney vetted it as well.
Good.
Yes.
I make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
A motion, a second, to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and should be ordinance number 131.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And finally, we have an ordinance appropriating funds for an employee appreciation bonus for the city of Conway employees. This is an ordinance for the yearly Christmas bonus that we've historically done in the past. Our employees are the face of our city. They are where the rubber meets the road. They're our greatest asset. And I would like to see us continue on with this program that y'all started a number of years ago.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
Mr. Winningham, we're good? Figures?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, are we still working on any kind of COLAs or anything in the
We are.
future?
Yeah.
We're still,
We're gonna set up a committee meeting, probably the first meeting in December, to discuss budget, and those things are in there.
okay, great, thanks.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
This be ordinance 017-132. Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. That's all I have tonight.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
To adopt that, y'all.
We knew what you meant.
We do want to adopt that.
Before we leave, and we're adjourned, but before we leave, I want to thank each of you for the work you've done with sales tax. I don't know the outcome yet, but I appreciate each of you. I appreciate the chamber for their hard work, and Bobby Kelly, and we'll just see where we land. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Long.
Hey, Mark, how long will it take for them to